Hi, my friends. Welcome to Deep Six, the Deep State, my daily recitation of the news that I see in Washington. And I try hard to do it with a straight face. Today I want to talk to you about the major development that's going on in the Uranium One scandal. The name of the FBI informant, the secret informant who infiltrated the deal and uncovered the bribery that went on, where Russia was bribing Americans, possibly including Hillary Clinton, to get access to our uranium supply. And that's quite an allegation and quite an explosive one that's likely to rock the political world in Washington. In fact, when his full testimony comes out in a couple of weeks, I think that may be the tipping point, the straw that breaks the camel's back and forces Sessions to name an independent prosecutor to investigate all of this. Because the revelations that this guy is going to, the revelations that this guy is going to spring on us are going to be quite significant, and I think will have a huge effect. First of all, let's get his name right. He was interviewed by Reuters, and he identified himself as William Campbell, I believe. I'm sorry, just a minute. Who is a former lobbyist and worked, of course, for the FBI. Let me just get this up here. Former lobbyist William D. Campbell, C-A-M-B-E-L-L, like the soup, has admitted that he's the secret witness in the investigation into the 2010 sale of a uranium company to Russia's Rosatom. Rosatom, Mr. Campbell told Reuters that he will testify and provide documents to Congress about the Obama administration's 2010 approval of the sale of Uranium One to Russia. The Hill, which is the source of this, revealed that in 2009, the year before Obama approved the Uranium One sale, the FBI compiled significant evidence that Putin's nuclear industry officials, quote, were engaged in bribery, kickbacks, extortion, and money laundering designed to grow Vladimir Putin's atomic energy business inside the United States, according to government documents and interviews. The Hill reported that the feds had a mole inside Russia's nuclear industry, now identified as William D. Campbell, who gathered, quote, extensive financial records, made secret recordings, and intercepted emails. Apparently, that evidence proves that Putin's people have bribed their way into an American uranium trucking firm, which of course is against the law. It's called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which makes one wonder, Corrupt Practices Act. According to the Hill's sources, Campbell provided evidentiary support to the feds that the Russian nuclear team, quote, routed millions of dollars to U.S. designated to benefit former President Bill Clinton's charitable foundation during the time Secretary of State Hillary Clinton served on a government body that provided a favorable decision to Moscow in the Government One deal. Since that report, Sessions has lifted the gag order on Campbell and given him permission to speak to members of Congress and their staff. Schweitzer, the Peter Schweitzer who wrote the book Clinton One, which first broke this scandal, provided a bit more evidence regarding what Campbell gave to the Justice Department. We know for a fact that the FBI has in its possession another tape, an audio tape, that was basically recorded by this FBI informant that's going to be coming forward. The Hill reports that their reporter has not heard the tape, but heard about the tape from people at the FBI, and that the audio tape apparently is Russian officials talking with this uranium company, talking about making donations to the Clinton Foundation to get favorable action. The tape was given to the Department of Justice prosecutors. The FBI field office requested the ability to wiretap and to survey the Clinton Foundation, but the Obama Justice Department came back and said no, there was not enough evidence for it. Now, and then of course, in the backdrop of all of this, is that the head of the FBI at the time these events were taking place is none other than Robert Mueller, who was the head of the FBI and never disclosed any of this to anybody, and let the uranium sale go through without disclosing this, let the whole campaign transpire in 2016 with its allegations of Trump colluding with the Russians, while he had all of this evidence indicating that, in fact, it was the Clinton campaign and Hillary herself who was colluding with the Russians. So this is very explosive. And as you know, Sessions has said that he has requested information from, I'm sorry, are we doing okay? And Sessions apparently asked the Assistant Deputy Attorney General to provide him with information which might give him an indication as to whether or not it was necessary for there to be a special prosecutor. And this information should be really significant. When I have a volume thing here blocking my video, and
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's all going out.
Okay.
So that's very explosive, and I think that this new information that's going to come out may be significant enough to push Sessions over the edge and name a special prosecutor. It's certainly going to completely upset the apple cart in Washington and move this scandal. That's good.
Yep.
Are we broadcasting okay? Are they getting it?
I see the likes and everything there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good. Hey, that's good. I did
Good
this
job.
myself.
Wow.
So I don't usually get it right. Renee just came in a few minutes later. So this is very important. And when the testimony comes out, I'll be right here with you discussing it and discussing what its implications are. But right now, the special prosecutor decision is right on the edge of the basketball hoop, and the ball could either go in or go out. And I think this Campbell testimony could really make the difference. Now, Washington is completely embroiled, as you know, in a lot of stuff relating to sexual harassment. It's as if they've sort of discovered it, and they're focusing on it in a major way. And of course, the issue there is, what should Roy Moore do? There is more and more evidence that indicates that some of the allegations against him may be true. The woman who claims that he attempted to rape her when she was 16 apparently worked at the shopping mall where the incident occurred, right outside of it. And she said that Moore would come by frequently, go to her counter and chat with her. And she said she was unnerved by that, and she asked the mall to ban Moore from the shopping mall. And she said the manager did that. And she said a bunch of her colleagues knew about it. She told her family about it. And there's a lot of contemporary evidence that may have happened. Also, when you look at Moore's signature in her high school yearbook, high school yearbook, he claimed that this was a forgery, but it looks like a damn good one. So that also is up for grabs. But look, I'm in politics, not a detective. What's important to me about this is that while I like Roy Moore, and you know I endorsed him in the primary, and I worked very hard to help him win the primary. I spoke to him by phone maybe 2 or 3 times a week during the primary, and had a long meeting with him at the start of it, where I flew down to Alabama at my own expense to try to help him. So I like him very much. And I'm suspicious of these charges because they came up right before the election, which is scheduled for December 12th, not during the primary when the Republicans could have nominated somebody else. But the voters of Alabama seem to be rendering their verdict, which seems to be guilty. Moore has gone from a 20-point lead to an 11-point lead to an 8-point lead. And the last 2 polls by Fox News have him behind by 8, and by the Republican Senate Campaign Committee behind by 11. Now, the most important thing is that we don't lose this seat to the Democrats. If Alabama elects a Democratic senator, first, we'll probably never get rid of him, because senators get reelected in general. And secondly, you're taking a seat that we need and throwing it away. in the immediate term, because this guy would take office right away, you're trimming our majority from 52 votes to 51 vote, which means it's effectively unworkable. And that's derailed because we want more to be in the Senate. There's a limit to loyalty. So I think that it's coming to be time for Moore to pull out of this race. Not necessarily because he's guilty, but because he's guilty of the ultimate offense in politics. He's going to lose. He can't win. And we need to hold that seat. So I hope that Moore puts the interest of the country first and understands the importance of keeping the Senate Republican. In particular, the tax cut that's going through now probably would have trouble passing if we lose that seat in Alabama.
Well, Dawn Sheldon says, I don't believe those so-called polls anymore. And Jean Marie wants to know, who leaked his name?
Who leaked his name? Campbell, the confidential informant.
The informant, yes.
It was not a leak. I think Reuters interviewed him, and he voluntarily gave out his name. In terms of not believing the polls anymore, yeah, but this is a pretty significant shift. And ultimately, you got to believe that something's happening when you lose 21 points in 5 days. And I think we should not be arrogant enough to think we can override that. Now, Congressman Jim Jordan made a statement during the hearing recently in which Sessions testified that I think was a really important summation of why we need a special prosecutor in the Uranium One scandal, and I'd like to share it with you. Jordan, who's a true blue conservative, Republican from Ohio, said that it would be unbelievable if the government and the Justice Department had funded the dossier on President Trump and Russia, and he called for a special counsel to further the investigation. What this relates to is that there is clear evidence that the FBI offered to pay Steele to amass more negative information on Trump. It appears that he didn't do so because he couldn't, but they clearly was offered that, and that's in the middle of a campaign to use government funds to fund negative research on the opposing party candidate. Jordan grilled Jeff Sessions Tuesday during his testimony. He urged the Department of Justice to appoint a prosecutor to investigate the 2016 presidential nominee Hillary Clinton, the Clinton Foundation, and the controversial Obama-era Uranium One deal. Jordan argued that for this case, a special counsel would be needed who wasn't involved with the issues during the Obama era. Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller, for example, who's investigating the issue, is unfit because he served as FBI director at the same time of the Uranium One deal. Jordan said Mueller was FBI director when he failed to inform Congress that all these things were going on surrounding the Uranium One deal. He didn't tell the committee to make the decision on whether that deal could be found, whether that deal could even move forward. So we certainly think he's compromised. As head of the FBI, he had a responsibility to tell the board that was approving this deal, the one headed by Hillary Clinton, of this evidence and to inform Congress of it. That's why we called for the special counsel. And things we've learned since have really reinforced the idea that we need one. The card central issue that he and the members of Congress are concerned about is whether or not the FBI, under former Director James Comey's leadership in the Department of Justice, allowed themselves to act in a politicized manner leading up to the 2016 election. The central issue in my mind right now is that the most compelling and concerning issue is the idea that one major political party can finance opposition research through the FBI. We're clearly dealing here with information that really compromises the FBI and compromises the two immediate former directors of the FBI. If all this is taking place, Jordan said, and that is turned into an intelligence document then go after the opposition party. You've got the government and the FBI complicit with a major national party and one party's presidential campaign to go after the other party's campaign, their nominee. I mean, that's unbelievable if that happened. And so that in and of itself should require special attention, in my judgment. And boy, his judgment is right. We need a prosecutor, and I think that Campbell's testimony may be the issue that drives this.
Michelle Brayhart-Gravert asks, if Roy Moore is not a current senator, can Allred be demanding a Senate hearing?
Not really. She shouldn't. And, Allred is a very irresponsible lawyer who just goes after a lot of stuff that she shouldn't and doesn't follow procedural norms. So I hesitate to give any credibility to anything she says. But the evidence she's bringing forward is significant.
And Kevin Jerome asks, if the dossier and fusion are found fabricated through candidates and government departments, what is the best legal scenario in litigation?
Well, the document, the dossier, was used by the FBI to get a FISA warrant to go after Chris Carter Page and to further their investigation. And it raises the issue in the doctrine of fruits of the poisonous tree, whether that evidence can be used at all, or whether Mueller can even continue with his investigation. If they find that the dossier was inaccurate and the FBI either knew or should have known that it was inaccurate, and they used that as the basis for their investigation, then everything they uncovered is the fruit of a poisonous tree. That's the legal doctrine. It was articulated by a Supreme Court judge. And that would be a serious issue and would probably end the Mueller investigation.
And Terrell Thomas asks, can United States block the uranium from leaving the United States?
Yes, we can, and we have. There's a law that prohibits it. But there is evidence that from 2012 to 2014 it was violated. And about a quarter of the uranium production was in fact exported. And we know that a lot of it went to Canada. But there's a significant amount of it where we don't know where it went. And it is entirely possible that it went to some serious enemies of ours, like Iran or North Korea.
And Tina Briggs asks, Nancy Pelosi is meeting with George Soros in Washington. Do you know anything about that?
No, but the paymaster ultimately wants to meet with his puppet. You can understand that. Now, Christopher Steele, Glenn Simpson, the head of Fusion, denies that Steele paid any of his sources for the dossier. But we have interviews with Christopher Steele on the record, the main one being with Vanity Fair, which reported that Steele said that he had a lot of long-term sources in Russia and throughout Europe that he's paid over the years, who provided him with the bulk of this information, confirming that they were paid. So that's, again, an inaccurate piece of false intelligence that the Obama people are peddling to try to derail this investigation.
And Joe Patterson wants to know, why can't Mueller be called to testify in front of Congress right now as to his actions on Uranium One deal?
My guess is that's coming next, after Campbell testifies. Campbell will testify that he told the FBI A, B, and C, and that Mueller knew this, and then the committee will say, how come you never told anyone this? And I think that's a legitimate question that they can ask Comey and Mueller, who are the two directors overlapping during the time of Campbell's work. No. Yes.
Oh, Don Howard wants to know, why isn't the FBI informant not be protected or is in witness protection? Excuse me.
I don't know. I don't know if he is or not. Okay. Now, I want to just talk about the tax cut a little bit. Donald Trump deserves at least the Pulitzer Prize and maybe the Nobel Prize for smooth political operation, something I never would have imagined that this newcomer to politics would be able to do. Here's the situation he faced. The Senate had rejected his effort to repeal Obamacare. And everybody came to him and said, you can repeal Obamacare if you repeal the individual mandate requiring people to buy Obamacare policies. So Trump said that's a good idea. And then whether on prompting from Trump or not, we don't know, McConnell and Ryan, the Speaker and the Majority Leader in the House and the Senate, asked the Congressional Budget Office, if we repealed Obamacare's mandate, what would that do to our revenue posture over the next 10 years? And they came back and they said, well, you'd lose a little revenue because you wouldn't get the fines paid by people. But on the other hand, you'd save a vast amount of money because enrollment in Obamacare would drop because there would not be the punishment of a fine to force people to enroll. And with Obamacare enrollment dropping, the bill for the feds to have to subsidize Obamacare would be significantly cut by over $400 billion over a 10-year period. Now, at the same time, the House and the Senate committees were busily formulating the tax cut bill. And their dilemma, quite simply, is that the House and the Senate Republicans had previously agreed that they would approve a tax cut that expanded the federal deficit over 10 years by no more than $1.5 trillion. Now, in fact, it's not going to go up that much because, as I've explained, the dynamic scoring, which is what they should use, says that once you cut the taxes, you're going to have a major increase in the economy and therefore probably an increase, not a decrease, in tax revenues. And that's just what happened with the Reagan and the Bush tax cuts. So they're going to, that's what the CBO said. So when the tax committees released their draft tax cut, it included a lot of pain for a lot of people. It eliminated the deduction for state and federal taxes. It cut back the deduction for medical expenses. It capped in one bill and eliminated in the other the deduction for property taxes and a lot of stuff like that. The result was that congressmen and senators began to raise hell and said, I don't want to hurt my constituents in this way. I'm going to really suffer if I do that. We got to make some of these good. And the committees came back and they said, okay, but we don't have any more money. We just have enough money to get a $1.5 trillion deficit, and we don't have enough money to go beyond that, and you won't let us do it. So then the Congressional Budget Office made its finding that Trump had requested that said you can get $400 billion more by repealing the Obamacare mandate. And everybody said, goody, with this I can make property taxes more deductible. With this I can help state and local governments with their finance. With this I can maybe restore the medical deduction. With this I can expand and maybe double the child tax credit that everybody gets so that it would really cut the tax bill of middle Americans. And everybody got enthusiastic about it and said, okay, goody. And then once they'd spent that money in their minds, they had to vote for the Obamacare mandate repeal because they needed the $400 billion. And the only way they could get their hands on it was to repeal that mandate. So he took the impetus for the tax cut that was heavily there and strongly Republican, and he said repeal the mandate, not just because it's a lousy idea and we ought to get rid of it, not just because Obamacare is a failure and too expensive, but because it'll make the tax cut work for you and your district and your state with your constituents. That's all you need to say to a congressman or a senator. And the Republicans all flipped and lined up solidly for the tax cut and for the Obamacare repeal that was built into it. Brilliant, brilliant move by Donald Trump. Someday they'll study that move in political science classes.
Well, first of all, Timothy Weisenhunt says, I love watching here. It's the only place I believe I can get true political answers.
Thank you.
And Steve Strawn wants to know, how can we find out which congresspersons were part of the $17 million payout?
Ah, good for you, Steve. I was just about to talk about that. First, it's $15.2 million, and it's in 236 separate claims for sexual harassment. Claims between 1995 and today, in which they were investigated and adjudicated, and members of the House and the Senate or their senior staffs were found to be guilty of sexual harassment to a point where the commission ordered the payment of a fine to the victims. Now, of course, the payment didn't come from the congressmen or senators who harassed them. It's coming from the taxpayers, from a special fund. And as part of the fund, there were non-disclosure agreements that they made all the women who got these payments sign. And as a result, we do not know the names of the people who perpetrated these acts of sexual harassment. Now, there are 535 members of the House and the Senate combined. And if 235 of them committed sexual harassment, that's something we ought to know about. Now, it's not clear that everybody limited themselves to one helping of sexual harassment. There could be multiple women, there could be multiple harassments of an individual woman, and there might be 20 or 30 congressmen and senators who really pigged out. But, hey, we want to know that, and we want to know who they are. And we're entitled to know who they are because it's our money that was paying for it. Exactly. Now, there may be some victims that do not want it publicized, that they were harassed, or more likely, that they complained about it. And those victims that wish it should be released from the non-disclosure agreement and allowed to testify. And if they choose not to, I think we should probably honor that. But I'm sure that the bulk of them will be happy, more than happy, to tell their stories. And we should give them that opportunity. So on this video, there's a petition, and there will be on the homepage and on dickmorris.com. There is one where you can sign one asking Congress, demanding that Congress release the names of these guys. I mean, we know about Roy Moore, and now we know about Al Franken, we know about Bill Clinton. I think we're entitled to know about them all, particularly because it's our money that they got because of what they did. They had a jolly old time, and we paid the bill for it. Mm. So I think that that's very important, and I urge you to sign that petition. But without a lot of public outcry, it's not going to happen, because the whole process was designed to cover this up so that the good old boys wouldn't be hurt.
Roger Winter asks, in your opinion, do you think the Senate will pass the tax bill?
Yes, I think it will. I'd give you about an 80% chance. They'll pass it in the next week or two in its current. Don't go crazy insisting on your amendments. We're going to go to the conference committee. The House and the Senate bills are different. They're going to put everything on the table and negotiate it and write a bill we can all support. And you'll have a voice at that table, and we'll make sure that the bill is one you can live with. But to make the process go forward, please vote for the bill as it is, so it can go to a conference committee, which can only happen when both houses pass it, and then we can proceed to reach a compromise. And I think senators are going to go along with that. Then they're going to sit down and they're going to talk about how do we divvy up the money. And because we're not talking about issues of principle here, we're talking about quantitative issues, I think there'll be a big move to split the difference. I think, number one, they will increase the child tax credit. So low and middle income taxpayers clearly and unambiguously get a big tax break and have to pay less money. Secondly, I think they will provide some relief where property tax bills of moderate priced houses, your average house, maybe up to about even expensive, going up to like $200 or $250 a year, you'd be able to deduct the property taxes. I think thirdly, they'll work it out so nobody faces a tax increase. They'll change the brackets in that way. I think they will also try to cut the top rate from 40%, 39.6, to 35 or 36, so that there's some relief in this for all taxpayers. And I think a big source of the revenue from that is going to come from what we just talked about, the Obamacare mandate repeal.
Dick, Scott Cleveland asks, do you actually think Sessions will appoint a special counsel?
Yeah, I think he's going to have to. And I think once he opened the door, I think he's going to have to. And I think that Campbell's testimony may provide the explosive force that forces him to do that.
And Don Howard wants to know, how do we get you back on Hannity and Judge Jeanine?
Well, I don't want to go. I want you to come to me. I want you right here in my living room, we're in my pink chair, where I can talk to you, and I won't have to schlep down to 6th Avenue and 46th Street in Manhattan with the traffic to have the pleasure of doing this in front of Sean Hannity. I'm reaching upwards of 100,000 people a day on this, so pretty damn good, and I think it's going to grow.
I'd say so.
And when it does, I will happily invite Sean and Janine to come on my show.
There you go. And Dave Baker asks, are the House of Reps that are pushing the 5 charges of impeachment a distraction?
Yeah, those are the Democrats. They introduced 5 articles of impeachment against Donald Trump. I mean, it's completely ridiculous. It's just an attempt to get attention away from the Uranium One deal, and I think that's significant. Now, there's one other thing I want to talk to you about. With the exposure of sexual harassment at all levels of government, I think Franken is going to be thrown out of the Senate, or at least forced not to run for another term. He's up this year, but maybe expelled, maybe forced to resign. But in any case, I think that as that comes out, we have to revisit what Bill Clinton did, and we have to look at it with new eyes. And at the same time, we have to revisit what Hillary did, George Stephanopoulos when he was on the White House payroll, and James Carville when he was a consultant receiving fees from the Clinton campaign. All of them knew that Jennifer Flowers was right. All of them knew that she had had a long-time affair with Bill Clinton, and that the tape recordings she introduced before the public, which taped Bill talking to her on the phone and arranging a date to see her, was not fraud, was not manipulated, was not a concocted tape, as Carville and Stephanopoulos and Bill Clinton claimed, but was completely authentic and completely real. One of the reasons we know that is that in the tape, Clinton insulted Governor Mario Cuomo, and he called Cuomo to apologize, so obviously the tape was real. And then Carville demeaned Flowers, and then Paula Jones sued for sexual harassment, and Carville demeaned her and said, "It's amazing what you catch when you drag a $100 bill through a trailer park." And people accused her of being a vulture and being predatory. And then Bill Clinton admitted his conduct, paid an $850,000 fine to Paula Jones, and lost his law license. So obviously what he did was untrue. And then when the Monica Lewinsky effort came up, Sidney Blumenthal, a consultant to Clinton, was going around saying that she was a stalker and that it was she who was inflicting herself on Bill Clinton and that he was just trying to minister to a troubled young lady. And that was proven to be wrong when the DNA showed up on her blue dress. Now, all of these episodes happened in the 1990s. But back then, we did not have the same understanding of the universality or the severity of sexual harassment. And I believe that now that we do, we should reopen those cases. They're not criminal cases, but in the court of public opinion, and give them a new airing. And in the course of it, it might make people understand why people like me who worked for Bill Clinton left, because this conduct was totally and completely unacceptable.
Well, Scott Cleveland asks, if Al Franken gets the boot, do you think the Republicans have a good chance to fill that seat?
Yes, I do. The guy who narrowly lost to Franken, and I do mean narrowly, was 120 votes after 4 weeks of recounting and some controversial decisions by the Democratic Secretary of State of the state of Minnesota, all of which went in a pro-Franken direction about what ballots to qualify. The Republican candidate was Norm Coleman, very good guy, a client of mine, used to be the mayor of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and just a very, very good, solid advocate. And he lost, and I understand he's going to run again, and I'll bet he wins now. Now, Trump has just returned from his Asian trip, and in the speech he gave at the end of it, he really explained in a way that the newspapers have never accurately covered what he's trying to do in trade deals. He is saying that we should not sign global trade deals like the Pacific Trade Rim, but that we should negotiate reciprocal trade deals with each country and demand of that country very specific things to help very specific industries in the United States that are being discriminated against in the international trade. I'll give you a good example. Japan is desperate for lumber, doesn't produce much, and has a huge shortage of housing. And they bar or tax or regulate out of possibility the importation of American lumber. And that looms as a very large issue, not just for American lumber people, but also for Japanese consumers who want to buy houses that it costs less to build. And American lumber is much less expensive, except for the tariff and the regulations the Japanese put on it. They maintain it's unsafe, and they won't approve of the importation, even though we use that lumber all the time, all over the place. That's the kind of thing you want to eliminate. You want to go to Japan and say, okay, you want us to let your autos into the United States. You got to let our lumber into Japan. Reciprocal agreements. Whereas what Obama and the free traders have been doing is we want global treaties where every nation says we'll refrain from discriminatory trade practices. And then an international organization is set up to determine what those are, with no right of appeal, no court beyond it, no ability of a government to reverse it. You basically cede the power to regulate trade to an international United Nations-like body. And that's a very bad idea, and Trump is opposed to it. Let me tell you a story. You remember that years ago there was a big problem that dolphins were being killed by fishermen, and there was a serious chance that some species of dolphin could become overfished and extinct. Well, the problem was that when fishermen switched from just having a net over a small area and catching the fish to what are called area nets, where the net would be 10 square miles and would drop over 10 square miles of ocean and scoop up every creature that was there. And the dolphins and the tuna both got caught by the net. And the dolphin couldn't escape. The fishermen didn't want to catch the dolphin. They had no commercial use for it. But the dolphin couldn't escape, and they died by the time they could cut through the net and try to free them. And there were so many being killed that they were really endangered. So the Green Movement in the United States and internationally, to their credit, designed a net that a dolphin could escape from, but a tuna could not. And then, but all the fishermen said, hey, we're not going to spend millions of dollars on new netting. We already have nets. And then the tuna companies, Starkist and Chicken of the Sea and, all of them, went to the tuna companies, the fishermen, and said, hey, unless you buy these new nets and use them, we will punish you by informing our consumers. What we're going to do is if you use the new net, we will put a dolphin-safe label on the can. But if you don't use the new net, we won't put that. And we'll advertise so Americans look for the dolphin-safe label when they buy tuna. And it worked spectacularly. They all switched to the new netting. The dolphin population was saved. There was no chance of extinction, and everything was great. Then Mexico appealed to the World Trade Organization, one of these multilateral bodies, and said, hey, our fishermen are poor. They can't afford to buy these new nets. This is a discriminatory trade practice by the United States against Mexico, and we want it overturned. And the World Trade Organization ruled in Mexico's favor. And right now, increasingly, you will not see dolphin-safe labels on tuna fish, and they're switching back to the old nets, and they're killing dolphins like they used to do. And we can't appeal that. We can't take it to a court. Our Congress, our president, and our states cannot legislate over it. We've conceded that power to the World Trade Organization. That's what Trump wants to stop. And in his deals in Asia, he killed the Trans-Pacific Partnership that would have been a 12-nation multilateral deal just like this, including Mexico and Canada and Japan. And he went to these countries and he said, hey, we don't want to kill it. We want to negotiate a bilateral, reciprocal deal with you of our trade priorities. And that's the wonderful step that Trump has taken in these negotiations.
David Tornatore, hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, new name. Any thoughts on the Chinese envoy to North Korea?
Well, I hope he's successful, and I hope they really care about it. Anytime China wanted to shut down North Korea's nuclear industry, it could do so by lifting its finger. It provides North Korea with all of its fuel, all of its energy, and buys the bulk of its exports, the vast bulk, 80-90% of its exports, which are largely rice. So that's a very important step, and I think a very good one, and I hope it works. Now, there was something that just happened yesterday that screamed at me, but those who don't know the background of it probably didn't appreciate how significant it was. When Ukraine first became independent and got rid of the post-Russian Soviet dictator they had and elected their first free president, I worked in his campaign, a guy named Yushchenko, who was poisoned by dioxin by a KGB agent. And I worked for him and helped him get elected, by the way, for free, while Manafort was making $18 million in cash working for the bad guy. But when he took power, the first thing he did was to move closer to the West, to actually seek admission as a candidate member to the European Union and move away from the Russian orbit. And Putin was furious about that. So he cut off natural gas shipments to the Ukraine. And the pipeline that fed natural gas to Europe, Eastern and Western Europe, a huge portion of which they imported from Russia, flowed right through the Ukraine to Eastern Europe. So when Putin cut the flow down, he was cutting it off not just for Ukraine, but for Europe as well. And the Europeans raised hell, and the Russians said, you talk to Ukraine, not to us. And a compromise was reached, but everybody understood that Moscow had its hand on that faucet and would turn it on or off as political developments in the Ukraine warranted. Then a lot of people said, hey, the Europeans said, why should we subject ourselves to that kind of blackmail? And Gerhard Schroeder, at that time the Chancellor of Germany, negotiated a deal with the Russians to build a pipeline under the Baltic Sea that would not flow through Ukraine, would go directly from Russia to Europe, and that way they could turn off the faucet on the Ukraine without incurring the wrath of the Europeans. Very controversial. The Americans opposed it, and it turned out that guess who? They made the head of the pipeline company at a huge salary, Gerhard Schroeder, the minute he retired as president of Germany. Corrupt from the very beginning. Well, the issue has remained, can you build a pipeline that goes directly from China to Western Europe without having to go through Russia, without having to go through territory Russia controls, which would be a vital step in strengthening Western Europe and decreasing Russian power. And now a new pipeline, a new railroad is being opened from the Black Sea to Greece, going through Turkish territory, not through Russian territory, that combined with ships at each end gives them a way of transporting goods from Europe to China without going through Russia. Huge step, huge blow for freedom. And was financed with American aid and with Azerbaijan aid. Azerbaijan is one of the former Soviet republics that has rebelled against Russia, and they're using their oil wealth to finance that railroad. And thank God, and good for them, and this is a major blow for freedom.
Derek Shapiro asks, do you think that the leak of the FBI informant's name puts him at risk for his safety? And do you think that they are surrounding him with protection now so he can testify before Congress?
They better be. You're right. I hope he is. If he were killed, there would be a huge hue and cry, but, Seth Rich was killed too. So I don't know. I hope he is. It certainly needs to be.
And a couple of the people, I lost the feed for a second, but they were asking if you could talk about the elephants. I don't know what they're referring to, but I don't know if you would know.
Oh, yes. I believe there was a weakening, a strength. I'm sorry. I looked at the story, but I didn't read it. Some action was taken to prevent the killing of elephants by further embargoing the sale of their ivory. They were killed for their tusks. And I don't know what measures were taken or how effective they were. And if you'd remind me, I'll talk about that on Monday.
I will.
And apparently now they're doing the same stuff to protect lions. Badly needed. And the main thing here is the consumers. Apparently the bulk of the elephant tusks are bought by Chinese. And you really need to crack down on that to end the killing of these marvelous animals simply for their tusks.
Hector Morales wants to know, aren't the Europeans buying natural gas from us now?
Excuse me.
Oh.
I cannot help myself.
Oh.
There is a pun I have to give you.
Oh. It's Friday.
Yeah, it's Friday. Groucho Marx said that he was in Africa and he shot an elephant in his pajamas. Said what he was doing in my pajamas, I don't know. And then he said, after I shot him, I tried to pull the tusks out, but I couldn't do it. I'm going to go to Alabama where the tusks are looser. If you turn this off and run screaming, I understand, but I needed to do that.
This is funny.
And I want to give you my Winston Churchill quote for the day.
Oh, you have one today?
I have one today.
Oh, goody. I'm excited.
Churchill, won the Nobel Prize, not for peace, not for winning the war, not for freeing us from the menace of German Hitler or of warning us about Russia's Stalin. Instead, he got it for literature because he wrote a 6-volume memoir of World War II that was basically still is, the major source material about what went on during the Second World War. And he was asked at one point, do you think history will judge you well? Do you think history will be kind to you in the way it treats your leadership in World War II? He said, I am sure they're going to be kind to me because I'm going to write the history myself. Which was why he wrote the memoirs. And it was a very successful effort on his part.
Impression.
Do we have a...
we have a selfie of the day and,
okay.
And a shout-out.
Good. Okay, selfie of the day is Jeff Baird with Hillary. What's that?
He actually has a bobblehead of Hillary for prison.
Oh,
and
good.
With next to his book in his office.
Can you show it to people?
I don't know if they can see it. I'm going to post it. Yeah, I'll post it in the
Lock
comments.
her up.
And also, for everyone, just seeing all the people that have submitted their selfies of the day, I'm going to be doing a collage every Sunday, and I'm going to put a whole bunch of them there, and you'll actually be able to find it on Dick Morris's main page in the photos. So your names will be on there. And
if you submitted these and she puts them in her collage, you can tell people you're a collage graduate.
And then we also have a shout-out to Kim Noriega.
Yeah.
She wrote in, she'd already gotten your book, but she bought one as a gift, so she wrote into the Dick Morris promos
Good.
site.
I autograph 10 or 15 of these a day. And Merry Christmas or, Happy Thanksgiving or Happy Birthday. So go to dickmorrispromos.
Nope, at Gmail.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, email.
dickmorrispromos at gmail.com.
Right.
dickmorrispromos at gmail.com. And include what you want me to write and your hard address, and Renee will send you the sticker, and you can put that in your book.
Yes. So Kim writes, Mr. Morris, I just wanted to say how much I'm enjoying your new book, Rogue Spooks. I also wanted to thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise with all of us on Facebook on what's going on in the political world today and every day. It is so much appreciated.
Did she compliment me on my puns? Well, I'm not writing anything for her. Thank you very much, and thanks for putting up with me.
Yeah, you have a lot of great
puns.
comments here, but we don't have all day, all weekend. So
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.